Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast brought to you by Briar Greaves Insurance. Protecting your assets starts with a company you can count on. So whether it's auto, homeowners, flood, boaters, or business insurance, Briar Greaves Insurance are the people to talk to. So visit briargreavesinsurance.com or give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. We have a fun show in store for you today as we are talking all about the NFC South. Yes, of course, we'll talk about the Buccaneers and get into the Falcons, Panthers, and Saints as well. What have they done this offseason? We have a very special guest that we'll introduce in just a moment. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is the face that runs the place at pewterreport.com, SR, Scott Reynolds. And also joining us this afternoon, a recurring guest. He's been on the show before. He helped us discover the Secret Bowl when we were in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. It's Greg Auman of Fox Sports. Greg, thank you so much for joining. How you doing?
Good, Matt. Scott, good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on. Always good, especially this time of year where we don't really get to see each other for a while.
Yeah.
Faces, good to see you guys.
Yeah, looking forward to catching up with you. The offseason program starts soon for the Buccaneers. And just a quick reset before we dive into the NFC South. There was a signing today. The Buccaneers brought back Sua Opeta. There you see him next to Ben Bredesen. That was supposed to be a duel at left guard in training camp. And it was until Sua Opeta tore his ACL at the indoor practice facility during, I think, the first week of practice. And so that kind of gave the job to Ben Bredesen by default. He certainly took the opportunity and ran with it all the way to being a wire-to-wire starter at left guard and a 3-year contract for the Buccaneers. So just a quick reset on what the Buccaneers have done so far in free agency. And let's take a look at their re-signings. You can see the 2 latest re-signings in red right there, Bryce Hall and Sua Opeta. Don't have the contract numbers for those gentlemen yet, and Sterling Shepard's contract, I don't think has come in yet either in terms of what we know. But you can see Jason Light, Mike Greenberg, Jackie Davidson, they've been busy re-signing a lot of their own players this offseason. That's no surprise. When it comes to their free agent additions and a couple of guys that have left, you see the 2 latest guys in red there, Charlie Heck, the swing tackle that replaces Justin School, who left for the Vikings. And he gets a 1-year deal. Royce Newman goes to the Cardinals on a 1-year deal as well. He was a backup guard last year in Tampa. So just about an even mix, just enough to not give the Buccaneers any compensatory picks next year, unless something else drastically changes. And what we're seeing is a reduction in the number of Bucs free agents that are still available. Will Golston, Shaq Barrett, Mike Edwards, those are Super Bowl champions from that 2020 team. Edwards, of course, came back at the midseason point last year to give the Bucs some depth. Shaq Barrett came at the tail end of the season to help provide a little bit of a morale boost. And Will Golston, we'll see what the future holds for Big Will. We saw him in the Bucs cruise. He was having a good time. I think he wants to come back, and he's got a soft spot in Jason Light's heart. We'll see if that happens, if he becomes a defensive tackle piece for this team moving forward. But looks like J.J. Russell, Ryan Neal, Troy Hill, Chase Edmonds, Eric Banks probably going to move on. And where does that leave the Buccaneers? Well, don't worry. Even though they're minus $13 million on the salary cap right now, according to Over the Cap. Over the Cap has not factored in Tristan Wirfs' contract restructure. That has not been reflected in the numbers. Of course, the Bucs don't really have minus $13 million because you can't be having a minus cap situation right now. The NFL will come down on you hard and give you a timeout and a spanking. So right now, the Buccaneers do have a little bit of cap room. And, of course, we'll see once all these contracts come in on Over the Cap where they stand. And as you know, Mike Greenberg can always restructure more contracts to create more cap room. So, Greg, just an overall thought on what has transpired so far for the Buccaneers this offseason for you.
Yeah, I think it kind of has been the recurring theme with this team, really, post-Brady. It's just bringing everybody back, just trying to get I think they feel really good about the core they have and the way they've put this team together, that as a default, they pretty much want to bring everybody back they can. Now, obviously, we saw the list. There was like 8 guys that aren't back. I think Eric Banks is probably going to join that list. It's one of those where he's got a torn tricep, so they're not going to resign until they give him a physical. He's got to be in Tampa. So I think whenever you see, I guess it's whenever the first phase of offseason work that would bring him back, I think you'll see him resign there. Right? It hasn't happened yet, but he's a depth D tackle is going to be competing for that last D line job there.
Right.
No, I think they've been frugal. They've probably done less cap wizardry and moving stuff around than I thought. I mean, it's kind of impressive to see. There's a couple other teams that are kind of mortgaging everything and trying to get everybody they can. And the Bucs haven't touched the Winfield contract yet, haven't really used anybody but Tristan Wirfs to create cap room. So I think they're, being responsible about that. Haason Reddick obviously is a big contract to bring in.
Yeah.
Not quite as dramatically as last year, but I mean, it does cost a decent amount to bring these guys back.
Sure.
Chris Godwin, I felt like, especially given some of the contracts they've gone since then, thought they got good value there. I think there were some concessions that, wow, Chris could have had more to go somewhere else and likes what he has here. No surprise there, but still impressive to see. Ben Bredesen, doubled his money from last year. I mean, that's kind of their model is we're going to bring you in on a 1-year deal for cheap. You go back to Chase McLaughlin, came in on the cheap and got paid right away. So it's kind of been as I expected. I mean, it's one of those where they haven't necessarily touched some of the positions we thought they would, but I think they've also kind of now made it clear there's a couple of positions we know they're going to hit in the draft.
Yeah.
And probably hit prominently in the draft, honestly. So, I think they've done a good job in terms of just addressing depth, not being so short-staffed at a position where it's like, oh, well, they have to get that. I mean, there's probably, with the exception maybe of inside linebacker, there's not many positions they can neglect the position if they want to.
Right.
Get by with the existing depth. They could go to camp with their roster as is at most positions. Especially on the offensive side.
And also a story that you broke last night that our own Matt Matera reported on. Todd Bowles getting some help on game day with the clock management and the game management decisions, Greg.
Yeah, I was curious about that. I don't know that much about it. They have it on the website as a front office position, not a coaching position. Zach, I don't know if it's Beast Line or Best Line, but got a hire from Jacksonville. Got a guy who'd been an analyst and kind of a stat hire in Jacksonville for like 12 years, but was their director of game management, was very much a guy in the booth in Jacksonville, kind of that, hey, probably should take a timeout here, probably should go for 2 here, all those kind
of. What's a timeout? What is that, Greg?
Bowles has taken a lot of grief for his first half timeouts and some of his end game decisions, if you will. So I think even if this is as much, this feels like somebody who's under Jackie Davidson as kind of an all-around analyst and do a lot of, hey, help us do a project and look at this and tell us what this could do to help us. I think he's kind of at everybody's disposal, but given that he's done this as a game management coach, I don't think they've had somebody with that listed as part of their duties really since like Cutter, I think, is the last really had that as the part of your job title. So I think it's smart. It's one of those where, again, just because someone's in Bowles' ear doesn't mean he's going to listen to that guy. Doesn't mean he's going to change 40 years of coaching instincts for him or 30 years of coaching instincts for him. But I do think it's smart to have somebody like that who, again, if all he does is have a certain time in the game or a certain time when he can step in and go, hey, we might think about going for it here, and give him a hard number and say, hey, just so you know, it's percentages are about 6% better going for it here than and have somebody who can at least put that in his ear, so it's not just the default instincts of what he's done his entire coaching career. So no, neat to see that. And the Jags had brought in, obviously, in bringing in a new regime there, kind of an opportunity to maybe get somebody that was cast aside or cut loose there in Jacksonville. But I thought it was neat to see. And again, I think anytime you see them specifically at a position, it's always neat to see that. I mean, it's in terms of just whatever his salary is to know that there's now room for that and appreciation for a need and more help on the coaching side and the front office side.
I was curious as well, like, is he going to be a front office person or a coach? But like even finding a bio on him was quite difficult because the Jaguars had already like erased it. The Bucs, it just says like his title. And that's about it. But it's fitting, right, that they got someone from the Jaguars after all of this saga with the Bucs and the Jaguars and Liam Cohen and Mike Greenberg doesn't take the interview. And then Robert Hainsey goes over there. So fitting that it stays with that timeline. But I mean, we could point to a lot of times last year where, like, I'd be sitting on the game day stream being like, timeout, Todd, timeout, Todd. Yeah. He refused to call him in the first half. And then I think it's not even just the timeouts, it's when to use them and when to call them. I mean, the Cowboys game where they scored too quickly and the Cowboys went at the end of the second quarter and kicked a 58-yard field goal. The Chiefs game, everybody knows about not going for two at the end. But I think we forget as well, Trey Palmer got the ball to the 1-yard line and they called a timeout with 33 seconds left and then scored on the next play. Yes, the Chiefs didn't end up scoring, but we all know how Mahomes and Kelsey and everybody can move down the field. It didn't hurt the Bucs in that specific situation. They ended up losing in overtime. But there's many points that you can look at during even last season. We can go back to Tom Brady's last year, that game in Cleveland with the overtime and everything that happened, or right before overtime. And it's clear. I still think there's a lot of good things about Todd Bowles, how he's able to keep the team together, how they've gone through adversity, even though last year was certainly a down year by any means. But it seemed like decision-making, clock management is certainly a big area that needed improvement going into 2025.
Yeah, I felt like the other thing I think that works against Todd a little bit is that I'm always somebody where whether it works or doesn't work, I like being able to ask, if not post-game Monday morning when we get them, like, hey, just curious what the rationale was behind it.
Yeah.
And I feel like Todd, again, it's not a huge thing for or against a coach and a success, but I feel like Todd doesn't always have the most thorough, thought out answers to why. And I think part of that, I think Todd's probably more worried about sharing something he doesn't want to than he is giving us a full explanation. I think there's probably more he could say, but I think sometimes he doesn't help himself, and that his explanation is like, no, that doesn't really, that's not what.
Yeah, and now he can sit there and say, Greg, the guy in the box told me to do that, so that's what I did.
A better question for a guy you're never going to talk to,
right?
So yeah, no, and like you said, some of the more perilous decisions or non-decisions he made, like you said, didn't cost him. Where there wasn't that like smoking gun, God, if you'd done this, really could have avoided that.
Yeah.
For the most part, there was times where it's like a wasted opportunity, or 40 seconds he didn't have, and they end up scoring anyway or something. So I think he dodged that. But again, I think in terms of, I think there are things that, especially, I mean, Todd's now one of the older coaches, head coach of the NFL. So I think it's an area for him where, again, he's not Pete Carroll, he's not Belichick, but I think he's been around long enough where it helps him to have young voices, challenging voices, just to put a bug in his ear that says, hey, just, I know you wouldn't normally do this, but the numbers say it's not a bad idea to, take this 2-down territory. It doesn't feel like it should be. It doesn't show up in your instinct and your motor memory as a coach to say, no, we should kind of go for it here. But numbers play out pretty well here. If you look at the time left. And I think, again, I have no idea how they're going to use this new guy, but I think it's just to have somebody in the building with that as a specific part of your job is a smart use of research.
I was told today that he's definitely going to be that guy on Sundays or on game days. Like, I got that confirmed, but it's, like what you're saying, he probably has some projects to do during the week, et cetera. He's not just, part-time hire. He's a full-time guy, and they'll find something for him to do when he's not up in the box assisting Todd. Greg, let me pick your brain on something here, because, we saw this, and if you go back to, let's all get some recency bias here, right? Let's go back to that Commanders game. And when you look at Todd Bowles, he made the decision to kick the field goal and go for the tie there, because he trusted his defense to get a stop, right? But really, that logic doesn't really apply, because and I understand, like, there is benefit to having a tie, like at least you're not trailing with 4 minutes and 41 seconds left. But he thought by getting the tie that his defense would be able to, in fact, stop the Commanders on that final drive. And they didn't, right? 4 minutes and 41 seconds off the clock, all the way down, kicked the field goal, the ball hit the goalpost and went in, much to the chagrin of Bucs fans and the team itself. But is that a situation too where this new hire can help Todd Bowles say, hey, we might want to go for it here, because if you're going to trust your defense after a kickoff, like, let's trust them to defend 80 yards, and you're down 3 points. It's not like you need a touchdown to win. But to me, that was one of those moments, almost kind of like where Todd Bowles decided to go for the tie rather than 2 in Kansas City to potentially go ahead and win that game. It just seemed like that conservative play calling. And you know what? I take that back. I don't think it's conservative play calling. I think he trusts his defense too much. And I think that is kind of the poison pill in all of this, is Todd Bowles' defense didn't force a punt the entire game, but for some reason, he thought on the final drive, the defense was going to finally do that, even though they were like 55% conversions, the Commanders were, on 3rd and 4th downs in that game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I know that whole week, all I talked about with Jaden Daniels going to this game is that you didn't want to get into an end game situation with him because he's so good, even as a rookie. There's like 3 or 4 different games they won at the very end of the game. I mean, again, Hail Mary is one thing that's great. Won in overtime, won to set up field goals late. I just felt like this wasn't a game that you wanted to have a 3-point lead in.
Right.
Or you wanted to be tied in at the end. And unfortunately, Bowles kind of painted himself into that corner where, again, I think the individual circumstance of what they were doing on offense and them having back-to-back flubs eats away at your confidence in a marginal situation. It makes you doubt your offense at the time where you need to have the most confidence to take a gamble. I say gamble. It's not a gamble. It's a choice.
Yeah, it's a choice.
I think we always think about offense as being active and defense as being passive. And like you see your defense out there like, hey, go win this game, right? And like, go do it. But it's really hope that the other team makes a mistake. Hope that, and again, what happens is if you have, again, rookie quarterback, you'd think, oh, that guy, unfortunately, Jaden Daniels is just unflappable in these moments and was there and did exactly what you shouldn't let him even have the opportunity to do. So, and that's not a hindsight thing. I think most people, when that happened, is like, oh, wow, okay. I mean, it's like there's like a half dozen quarterbacks in the league where no matter when you score at the end of a half, like, oh, you left him too much time.
Right.
And 4 minutes and 41 seconds is definitely ample time for him to have it. And again, it's one of those where what Washington did so well was just not get off the field. And that's incorporating 4th down into your offense for sure. And just being really good at moving the chains and keeping the ball. And it's paralyzing because you have it's like Baker Mayfield, getting the coin toss against the Chiefs and you just kind of look up like it's
exactly. The head bleed.
He's taken, I mean, again, that was your strong side. That's your dominant half. And they were on the sidelines for the last 5 minutes of a playoff game. So again, I'm sure we sit here and if he does the opposite and he goes for it, and again, there's a botched snap or a play saying they'll go wrong. Well, oh gosh, your defense could have. You can second guess it the other way. I think Bowles' default as a coach, not to say conservative, but I just think his tendency is to choose the traditional path. Yeah. Again, he's a defensive coach. You want him to have confidence in his defense, even on a day where they really didn't do a lot to earn his trust and his confidence. 0
takeaways, didn't force a punt,
And, I mean, and that's part of the reason to listen to Bowles very consistently since the end of that game has talked about takeaways and the importance of,
ball hawks.
That's what they have to do, ball hawks, because I mean, there was a time that's what they did really well. And they've completely lost that.
That's right.
Like I forget what year it was that like Carlton Davis was talking about getting 30 in a year, and we weren't sure if that was 30 interceptions or 30 takeaways. They had 7.
Right.
Which used to be like a good 2 games.
The record is 31 interceptions, and that was the Super Bowl year back in 2002. You know what I'm saying?
So we don't confuse this defense with this defense. There's things they do very well, but I think that's the single best asset a defense can have in terms of making life easy for an offense, short fields. You go back to even like 22. I mean, that last Brady year, one of the reasons they really struggle is they had no short fields.
That's right.
No easy drives. And if you're starting every time 70 yards away from the end zone, even if you're a good offense, you're just kind of swimming upstream all the time. Right. So I think, again, I'll be really surprised if this draft doesn't have, again, you think about Haason Reddick, all right? I think about Haason Reddick. I was fortunate, and I got to cover the Super Bowl in Arizona when the Eagles were there. They were 3 years ago. And I wrote on Reddick there in that Reddick that year. I mean, I think you could have made a case for like defensive MVP for Reddick that year. It's like 16 sacks. It's 5 forced fumbles. And Reddick made a point. I can remember talking to him on the podium at the Super Bowl, and he's a college assistant that taught him way back at Temple that like it's not enough to have the mindset to get a sack. If you get a sack and all they do is lose 4 yards, you've shorted an opportunity.
That's right.
And if you can get there, perfect pick right there. It just he has a mindset to get the ball out. We certainly saw the Bucs have that to a small extent with, again, I mean, I think That's something that Winfield does instinctively
Yeah.
as a DB, but you really need that at the point of contact with the quarterback. That's
Yeah,
where
you
you can get high volume turnovers, is getting 30% of your sacks to be turnovers.
Shaq Barrett back in 2019,
Yeah, Shaq,
19 and a half
I was gonna
sacks,
say.
6 forced fumbles. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's a little telling, too, that one of their best players at knocking the ball loose was Tyke Smith, who was a rookie and, still, getting his feet wet in the NFL. But on that topic of Haason Reddick, what did you think about the move overall? Because certainly the Bucs need that help with the 4-man pass rush, but we all know what happened with him with the Jets last year. And then also, do you think that ends Tampa Bay adding to the edge rusher position, or do you see them going at it in the draft as well?
I like them getting Reddick. I think, again, fans have this Pollyanna offseason mindset where it's like, wow, they could get Trey Hendrickson. Well, they could go get Myles Garrett. What would it cost to get, Michael Parsons? And I think it's important to operate within reality. And Reddick felt like the high end of reality for them in this class. And I think 1 year and $14 million is a lot for them for what they do for outside spending. But I do think it feels a lot like when they went and got Jason Pierre-Paul in terms of taking somebody who's a known commodity, a leader, somebody who has good ties in the locker room too. I mean, the whole Larry Foote thing, he and Todd Bowles kind of having whatever cool connection they have as Temple guys. There's not that many Temple guys in the NFL, so it's a bond. And I think the motivation of him. I mean, again, he did not put a good year on tape in any way. Whether the Jets should have known he wasn't going to play on that contract or not, to have your entire existence with a team be that bad is not what you want to have out there. So I think just the idea of resetting that and clearing that cash and resetting himself as a guy who I think is like the only guy in NFL history to have 4 double-digit sack seasons with 4 different teams in a row. And it's neat because you're like, wow, he's so consistent. But it's like, why is it that he keeps not being retained by the team he has the success for? And I think to talk to Haason, there's not a negative anything to him. I think he's going to be a positive presence in this locker room. I think if you talk to teams that have had him, maybe not the Jets, but most teams that have had him, I think you're going to get a really good report card in terms of what he does, what he adds to this room. I mean, that's still a really young room. Okay.
It is.
Anthony Nelson's starting to get up there. You can't call him young anymore, but to think about Diaby, to think about Marquise Watts,
Chris Braswell,
absolutely. Yeah. It's a young room. It's a young room that could use a JP on the ropes, and result of him being there in sacks. And I think, again, if you set the over under at 9.5 for him, I'd probably take the over right now, honestly. Which is strange for a guy who, again, did almost nothing last year. You have to trust that that's not who he is. Team where he didn't necessarily have the motivation he needed to have. If they get 22 Haason Reddick, it'll be a steal. It'll be he's going to make a good deal more than $14 million on his next contract if this is who he is again. And I don't know. It's funny. It's one of those things where I don't know if the Bucs would pay a crazy amount to keep a 31-year-old pass rusher. They might say it was awesome to have a great year. We'll take a 3rd-round comp pick. Yeah. Best of luck to you in, Minneapolis or wherever you go. But that's what you want. You want to have that came in, got them for value, brought them back where they were. And that, I mean, again, that's their real big swing in this free agency right now. Everybody else is a depth guy. I don't even know you guys talking about comp picks. Riley Dixon's kind of right there on the very bottom cusp of what means a qualifying free agent for comp picks. Again, if they got something, it'd be like a 7 or something.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's telling when you basically have one addition.
Right.
That's more than a $3 million guy. It's all 1 year, $1 or $2 million contracts, depth pieces, special teams pieces. And if you get one chance to write a big check, you got to make sure you do a good job with that.
So, Greg, as we kind of dive into the NFC South here, let's talk about, the Buccaneers have been on top for the last 4 years in this division. They've made the playoffs each of the last 5 seasons. Are they still kings of the hill? If football started tomorrow with these existing rosters, the draft hasn't happened yet, free agency, is still ongoing, but the major waves have already crashed. Is this an NFC South division championship team, given the fact that the Falcons, That's just what they do. They swept the Bucs last year. They had the lead up until they lost it, and then they cost Jimmy Lake his job, losing to the Panthers in the final game of the season. But Tampa Bay had won, and they clinched their spot. So is Tampa Bay still the king of the hill in the NFC South right now?
Yeah, I think this absolutely is their division to lose until someone goes and takes it from them. The Falcons swept them last year and still didn't take it from them.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge for the Bucs, I think, is that they're the old guard of this division. They have continuity in their coaches. They have a lineup that's been together. Again, not that 2 years as a quarterback is a long time, but in this division, that's some continuity at quarterback. So I think the challenge on Tampa Bay is to match the urgency of the rest of the division, because there's coaches and there's teams that are playing with their backs against the wall. If Atlanta doesn't take a step forward, Raheem's not going to get another shot.
Right.
I think Carolina needs to take another step forward just to make sure that it's not an owner with a great amount of patience there.
Right.
New Orleans, I think, has a different urgency. They got a new head coach. I don't know they're going to be firing a guy after 1 year, but I do think there's a real window closing in New Orleans where the vets that they've kind of built around and borrowed against and leveraged for cap space are getting up there. And I don't know how much the Cam Jordans and the DeMario Davises and the Tyrann Matthews have left.
Yeah.
So I think there's an urgency all around the division that maybe the Bucs don't have. I mean, again, if you go back to Bucs around Thanksgiving, there was definitely an urgency and a worry for Todd Bowles if things didn't get turned around. They did. So I think you kind of have to remember how perilous life was there for a bit and cling to that and use that as a motivation that you don't want to get back to that. You don't want to put things in jeopardy. You don't want people wondering how much change is going to happen in the offseason. This is unprecedented sustained success in Bucs history.
It really is.
Have this many division titles, to have they had never won back-to-back division titles in their history.
Right.
So to have whatever, to have the playoff streak at 5, to have the division streak at 4, is uncharted territory. And I think anytime people start talking about bowls, even if it's a crappy division, even if you're winning at 9-8 or 10-7, it still hasn't ever happened like this before.
John Gruden won the most division titles. That was 3. And he won them in 2002, 2005, and 2007. He was here 6 years, right? And Todd Bowles wins 3 in his first 3 years. And as you said, and I think Matt and I agree, they're the favorite to do it again, right? So, I mean, I think this is going to be a better team than the 10-win Buccaneers last year. And, and I do think they are, the kings of the hill right now until somebody takes their crown. So who is that second team, Greg? We'll kind of dive into the second team. We've got some super chats we'll get to in just a second, Matt. But right now, when you're looking at that silver medal in the NFC South, Falcons, this is the rising Panthers. Do the Saints have one last gasp in them before they have to just completely do what they've wanted to avoid doing and they should have done years ago, which is blow the whole thing up?
Yeah, I think it starts with Atlanta. I think they're the most viable. I mean, again, we're really close to winning the division this year. If they don't have the collapse they have, if Cousins doesn't have the 3-4 weeks from hell he had in the middle of things there to reset them, this could have been their division. So I think it definitely starts with them. I think it is asking a lot of Michael Penix to step in and play at a high level. I mean, I think he had what you'd think about like a redshirt year. So got a little bit, got 3 games at the end there to show what he can do to get a feel of things. But he's basically a brand new quarterback, and I think he's given them reason to have confidence. But even Cousins being down, Cousins had some really good games. Penix has to have those good games if they're going to get back to where they were or better this year. I think Atlanta's defense obviously needed some changes. They've done that a little bit, but not really a ton of wow additions. I think to get Leonard Floyd helps in that they really have neglected their pass rush. I think their first-round pick, I think, will be another edge rusher. I think they have to keep putting into that because it's lacking. And
Raheem Morse was at Mike Green's pro day, the Marshall outside linebackers pro day yesterday.
Right. And when you think about teams that are picking right ahead of the Bucs and definitely a threat to take picks that the Bucs like, Atlanta's one of those teams.
Yeah, for
Arizona
sure.
is one of those teams. And I think it's one of those where that guy you get really excited about at 19, there's a real chance he's gone at 15. And I think you have to embrace that because they have some of the same needs. They brought Divine Diablo in, but they could use a linebacker. Okay.
Yep.
They definitely could use an edge. They could certainly use a corner. So when you have a direct rival and like your closest division rival with so many direct positional needs it's tough because the Bucs are looking and you need them to mess up and them to take a receiver at 15 or take a lineman at 15 or kind of go best player available and not worry about the needs that you have. Because there's definitely a world where like 4 edges are off the board and Jahad Campbell goes to Arizona and now you're Will Johnson maybe. There's things they could do, but there's a lot of scenario. I'll look at a mock draft and I'll say, wow, I think that's a mock where Jason would trade down.
Yeah, right.
Like if he's presented with those options, maybe he goes down 3 spots. Somebody had a mock the other day where there's all this excitement about Jackson Dart. Okay, so it's like a model where Bucs traded clear from like 19 to 33, okay, and picked up the first pick of the 3rd round and a 3rd rounder next year, where there are real assets they gained.
Right.
I don't think they will take themselves that far out of it. You have to really kind of quietly, low key hate this draft.
Yeah, exactly.
To really take yourself out of the 1st round. When they jumped down for Logan a couple years ago, it was like 5 spots down.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They were much further back.
To go from 19 to out of the 1st round.
That doesn't seem like a Jason Light move.
Has to just be unimpressed by everything. It's not just that the board didn't go your way; you just don't like the draft.
That's right.
Bucs fans are certainly going to be crossing their fingers once like 15 comes up, waiting to 19. Sticking with the Falcons, just curious how you felt about when the Falcons made the move to Michael Penix. Yes, Kirk Cousins was struggling, but that was also a huge situation with like the division on the line, just turning to a rookie there. What'd you think of the move? Was it fair or was it the right move?
I understood it. I mean, it's one of the, Cousins, it's like, I forget the numbers, but it was like no touchdowns and 8 interceptions in a span of 4 games. I mean, just an absolute hard to find
pretty much the opposite of what happened when he played the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
Right. So I got it. And it almost felt a little bit of an unfair position to put Penix in that Penix already kind of came into that weird situation. And then to say, hey, I'm going to give you the keys, but instead of like a nice, pleasant, here's how you're going to come in. It's kind of like if your kid's never driven before and you just kind of have him hop over and take the wheel on the interstate.
Yeah.
Exactly. In front of him.
That's a great
analogy. Not an ideal play. And I thought Penix handled it very well. Obviously didn't get
his first game was the Giants, right? I mean, if you're going to
helps.
put him in there, that helps. But to your point, the Commanders game was rough. There's a couple other outings there. And I just wonder with Penix, it's almost a double-edged sword. Like he got his feet wet. He got a taste of the NFL. That's going to help him this year. But those 3 games, now he's on film a little bit. If you're a defensive coordinator, like you got enough to work with there. And, he's a talented guy. He's probably going to level up this year. But it's not like this guy's, an unknown commodity now.
Right. And no, I mean, I think they trust him. I think this is his franchise. Even Cousins being there right now, I still think that's more with an eye towards some kind of post-trade, post-draft trade, if you will. There's not a lot gained by having him have Penix looking over his shoulder every time he throws a pick.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like a weird, still in the process of working itself out situation.
Yeah.
I think Atlanta still has to do more on defense. It's one of those where Jeff Ulbrich comes in and it will change things.
Mm-hmm.
But from a personnel standpoint, they lost Grady Jarrett and the guys they've added. Again, Leonard Floyd, definitely a step in the right direction. But kind of also feels like how they felt about Judon last year in terms of really help, probably.
Yeah.
You think about Diablo. Okay, Diablo, Raiders had so much cap space available. So
and they let him go, yeah.
For them to let him go from a really bad team and a really bad defense should tell you something.
And they also lost Spillane, too, out there. So it's, they let both of their linebackers go in the middle.
Right. Jordan Fuller, I don't mind that. There's good moves they've made. I think they're going to put the main assets of their draft into defense and getting better there. But
and here's the crazy thing. They spent so many draft picks last year on defense. I mean, you had Penix, then I think their entire defense was draft from the 2nd round on. They got Rucororo from Clemson and a bunch of other guys. But the other thing, too, is like, I remember Buccaneer fans were just like gritting their teeth and like gnashing their teeth over, oh my gosh, they signed Justin Simmons. They signed Matthew Judon. The Falcons are making a run at it. And it just goes to show you, it's like, this is not Madden. This is not where you just add these players, they're automatically good. A lot of free agents don't work out. And the reason why they hit free agency is because the team that they were on before didn't want him anymore.
Right. And it's, I mean, from Atlanta's standpoint, I think Bates worked out incredibly well.
He did.
So
yes.
I get why, if Bates worked out, you're like, we should get Simmons.
Yep.
Simmons was unsigned for so long.
Exactly.
It kind of, everything that happens, people are like, why don't the Bucs get this guy? Why don't the Bucs go get Rasul Douglas? Or why don't the Bucs go get anytime there's somebody who's healthy and unsigned,
the league is telling you something.
Yeah, it just, you kind of have to, well, there's not to say there aren't important additions and valuable additions going to be made, but you definitely have to have pause and say, why is every other team in the league kind of politely declined?
Right.
You know? I think these moves can work out well. And for Atlanta, they're not that far away, if you will, on defense right now. A change of coordinator, a spark at the line of scrimmage where you add 10 sacks to what you had the year before will make their secondary better. Okay. So no, I think of them, to get back to where we started, I think of them as the primary threat to the Bucs. If Penix can click, if he can click even at the way that Nix or Daniels or May, any of those other rookies did as rookies, if he has that in year 2, they're going to be dangerous because he has a lot to work with. I don't know that he will, you know? But again, mature, exciting. Again, a lot to like about Michael Penix. It doesn't always take. So I just think it's one of those where you always have questions about a team where the biggest question mark or the biggest uncertainty is at quarterback. I mean, Carolina is kind of still the same way. I mean, Carolina has a lot of other concerns, don't get me wrong, but I think we saw glimpses of Bryce in the second half of last year that, that's the guy that won in college. That's the guy that they drafted number 1 overall. Most of it is still him coming from behind, him trying to claw away wins and stuff like that. I think Carolina can take a step forward. I don't know if it's to the 9 wins or what you need to even be a wild card. I think if they
we'll talk about Carolina in just a second, but Greg, you're a trivia. I mean, you're the almanac, right? I mean, you know stuff, right? You know stuff that I've forgotten just because I'm old. But there was an NFC South legendary quarterback whose last game was a painful loss to the Buccaneers. Matter of fact, his last pass was picked off by the Buccaneers. Do you know who that was?
I don't know if you're going for Drew Brees here.
I am going for Drew Brees, who is also the co-owner of Walk-Ons.
Game day at Walk-Ons is just different. And it starts with the way our teammates prep each dish from our scratch menu. No shortcuts. We are hand-cutting every single mozzarella log straight from the block. Hand-peeling, stuffing, and bacon wrapping each voodoo shrimp. Hand-carving ribeyes for our steaks and po' boys. And hand-slicing, then tossing our boneless wings in our house-made sauces. With wall-to-wall TVs and food like this, why would you want to watch anywhere else? That's game day. The Walk-Ons way.
And there's plenty of slam dunk madness going on at Walk-Ons. Make sure you watch Hoop Dunk apps all month long. That's right. I've watched a couple of March Madness games myself at Walk-Ons Sports Bistro. 3 Tampa Bay area locations to serve you: Wesley Chapel, Midtown Tampa, and Lakeland. And don't forget their happy hour menu. That's right, Tuesday, which is today, all-day happy hour, including $5 Tito's, 2 happy hours tomorrow and Thursday, 3 p.m. to 6, 9 p.m. to close, and then another great happy hour on Friday, 3 p.m. to 6. $3 happy hour pours, $3.99 domestic pints, $4 house wines, $5.49 22-ounce domestic drafts, and plenty of starters starting at $6. So make sure you get to Walk-Ons for your happy hour and enjoy those incredible happy hour prices. Couple of programming notes real quick before we tackle the rest of the NFC South. A look at our lineup here for the rest of the week. Matt and I will be back tomorrow to discuss how the Bucs stack up with the NFC. We're talking NFC South today. Let's take a look at the whole conference. Matt and I will do that tomorrow at 4 o'clock here on Pewter Report TV. You can find us at Pewter Report TV. That is our YouTube channel, of course. On Thursday, the show will be, will the Bucs trade up or down in the draft? So that's been a question on a lot of people's minds, and we'll do our best to address that Thursday at 4 o'clock. Next week, a couple of shows we already know about. no show on Monday. We're driving down to West Palm Beach for the NFL annual meeting. But Tuesday, we will be talking with Todd Bowles, and we'll have the Todd Bowles press conference reaction at 4:00 in the afternoon. So make sure you check that out here on Pewter Report TV. That'll be our first show of the week. We'll have another show on Wednesday and Thursday. I've got a special guest we're working on lining up for Thursday's show. Not going to reveal who that is now, but you're going to want to tune in for sure. But that night, we will be having our 4th mock draft show. Bucs Attack the Secondary. We'll have our 4th mock draft of the offseason come out at 5:00 next Thursday. Josh Capo and I, you know the drill. We'll be on at 8:30 that night talking about it, getting your questions answered, your comments attended to, and that will be next Thursday. Of course, our 5th and final mock draft will take place the week of the NFL draft, and that will drop on Monday, April 21st. So, Matt, we've got a couple super chats here. Some are geared towards Greg. So let's have at it.
Yeah, let's start with one from our Pewter Report YouTube channel member, Paul, aka OG Baker Bro, who says, a quick note of appreciation to Greg for always taking time to answer fan questions on social media. He, like PR, always takes the time to acknowledge the Bucs fans, and it's definitely appreciated.
Thank you. No,
yeah.
I always appreciate that. And I don't know if I dealt too much with him, but lots of good questions on Twitter. I still call it Twitter, but
yeah, it's all.
Yeah, I always like engaging on there. I mute my share here and there. Don't get me wrong. Block a couple here and there. But
you throw a block party a couple times, don't you?
Yeah, I'm not at like a Stroud level of blocking right now, but
right.
Shout out to my friend Rick there.
Right.
But I feel like if you're aware of what people don't know and what people are asking about, it's a really handy thing to know what they care about or what the uncertainties are. It just reinforces in your mind, oh, maybe that is a thing, or maybe I should be more about that kind of thing. So no, I enjoy the back and forth with people on there, and I'm happy to help.
We have a $5 super chat from Samuel Fisher. Thank you very much. Who says, Greg, how do you feel about Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel as draft targets for the Bucs, or even Darian Porter for a starting corner?
Spoiler alert, our good friend Samuel Fisher went to Iowa State. So just in case you didn't pick that up, Greg.
Very good. I had, I won't say which one of those. I did we do a combine confidential where we're reaching out. I think we ended up getting about 40 guys from the combine, and one of those guys is a confidential guy. So I know him. I've gotten to talk to him more than I can let on, obviously. It's one of those where you'll see names that match out that you see as potential matches for the Bucs. And I think, with Jalen, it's a curiosity, and that I don't know right now that I think of receiver as a glaring need for the Bucs. Like with Godwin back, I think if Godwin weren't back, I think there's definitely a world where they, I think if the right guy fell at 19, you could argue it. But I think with Godwin, they've got a really good 1-2-3 right now. Yeah. And then their depth, Sterling Shepard got $500,000 guaranteed, which isn't any kind of lock. He makes the roster, but it shows at least a confidence in liking him as one of those reserves. I think you still have Jarrett, you still have Cam Johnson, you still have guys that are young that they like.
Right.
So I don't. It's one of those where I think if they only have 6 draft picks right now, barring an amazing guy falling to them, that is well beyond their expectation, I don't expect them to use a receiver this year.
Yeah.
They won't. It's not to say they can't.
Yeah.
I don't go into it expecting it to be a prominent part of their draft. I think they only have 6 picks. I think the glaring needs and the immediate needs should pretty much be in line with what's out there. Mostly on defense, honestly. If 4 of those 6 aren't defense, I'll be surprised.
And when you look at Darian Porter, he looks like a Buccaneer corner, right? He's super fast. He's 6'2". He's a big guy. But it just took him so long to get onto the field, right? I think he's a 5th or 6th year guy, really only was a 1-year starter. And that kind of raises a little bit of an alarm bell too there,
No, absolutely. And the size stands out. I mean, I think of all the Bucs positional minimums, maximums, long corners is a big part of it. There'll be people that guys, I mean, again, lots of people want Asante Samuel. Okay. And why haven't the Bucs signed Asante Samuel? And I'm amused at the idea that poor Jamel Dean is too injured to stick around, but they like going to get Asante Samuel, who played 3 games last
year. He also gets injured.
That's just, there's like a level of irony. I'm always like, oh, that's neat.
He's also 5'10", 185, and he's actually smaller than Vernon Hargraves was,
Right. So I just think it's one of those where especially if you think that they're comfy with Tyke at safety and Izzy at nickel, or at least as a guy to beat at nickel. Yeah. I don't think there's a small corner that's a logical fit for them. I don't know if he has to be 6'4".
Yeah.
Porter's a big corner. Okay. Yeah. That's big by Bucs standards.
That's right.
But again, it's what they like. Okay. There's still some big targets in this division where it makes sense to have that type as a body type as what you like. And I feel like there's a little bit of value there in that. I don't know if he's, they've had some really good, you think about what they did get Zion McCollum, where they got Zion McCollum as an absolute physical freak with size in the 5th round. And it felt like, again, when they got him, it felt like, oh, it's actually a pretty good, smart upside.
And they also traded up to get him too. That was the thing. Like they liked him, but he did fall to the 5th round.
Right. So I can see where they say that worked. And if there's a position to overdraft and a position to overstock with talent, it's definitely corner, especially what they dealt with.
No doubt.
I don't know that anything they've done with bringing people back and signing guys this year changes their interest in upgrading at corner and having better depth. It's nothing against, I say that about safety too. Nothing against Merriweathers and Josh Hayes and those types. I think they want to be better there. So when you get to those 3rd-day picks, when you get to 4, 5, 7, that's definitely positions where I can see them not only going after guys like that, but taking guys that are, again, like McCollum. Maybe it's a small school guy who's a freakish athlete. Maybe it's somebody come back from injury. Maybe it's kind of a cut your corner pick where I don't think they're going to use the character one. I don't think they're going to take somebody they don't like from a character standpoint. But I think that would be a smart use of 4 or 5 to me, to add depth. Maybe not this year doesn't feel like a huge upgrade, but it gives you somebody you can groom. And like McCollum, if in year 3 he's a starter.
Yeah, the gradual development.
Right. The slow cook kind of thing. I like that.
We have 2 more super chats we'll get to kind of back to back. Thank you to Ronnie Robinson with the $4.99 says, when is the next in the current episode coming out from the end of the season? Go Bucs. And then LDBC's most wanted next to the $4.99 says, am I crazy to think we go defensive tackle early in the draft? Vita and Hall are going to be free agents next offseason, and Gaines is average.
Well, Vita's still under contract.
Yeah.
So he won't be a free agent next year. He still has, I believe, a couple years, I think, through 2026. Is that correct?
He's here for a little bit. So
he's here through 2026. So
I think that's what he's saying next, or she's saying, like not this offseason. Yeah, so 2 off seasons from now.
Yeah,
at least. In the current, I don't know. They kind of announce it sporadically, I would say.
Yeah.
When it comes to it.
Yeah, I agree. Did we lose Greg?
We lost him briefly, but I think we can bring him in right about now. There he is.
There we go.
Sorry, guys. Sorry
no worries.
I just got out of the wrong browser. No.
Yeah.
So, again, not a free agent after a year.
Yeah. 2026.
Yes. All right. And again, I don't know that that's the end of the road for Vita Vea, but I do think it's a position. Again, I think Canty gives you somebody young you could build around there, but the rest of their depth gains. If it's Golston, is not a young position, and that's probably a position you want to stay young at. So there's not a guy I see that's a match at 19 right now for them, but 2nd round wouldn't surprise me if the right guy were to fall. I don't think of it right now as part of the plan. But again, Will Golston. Golston wasn't a high draft pick. 11 years old. Right. So again, 4th round. If the right guy is there, if you only need him to be a 300 snap D lineman this year, there's definitely people that can help you with that.
There's so many good defensive tackles. This is a defensive tackle rich draft, and I think maybe the strategy too is there's only so many teams that need starting caliber defensive tackles, right? And so by the 3rd round, those teams will have probably picked their defensive tackles. And so you might be getting a 3rd round talent in the 5th round. If you're the Buccaneers, you wait because there's just so many good defensive tackles this year. There's really the supply far exceeds the demand. And I think you can get a value defensive tackle on day 3.
No, I agree. And I forget the other question is in the current. I'm not sure about that. That's in the current.
That's great. The Bucs.
It's so much fun to watch.
It really is. They do a great job.
Everybody they do great job. Again, I'm jealous because they have such amazing access.
Yeah.
But the way they bring it together,
well done.
It's artwork. It really is. They do a great job with it, and I pretty consistently reach out to those guys and I'll say, wow, like, again, I'm around these people every day.
Yeah.
And you show me things and sides of things I wasn't aware of. And it's really something they do very well and have for years here.
Yeah. Well, something that somebody did really well last year was Dave Canales getting Bryce Young to actually look like a guy that might be a first-round quarterback. I mean, he benched him to start, which I thought was kind of a curious, questionable move, but it turned out to be a good thing, like a blessing in disguise. Kind of reminded me of what happened to Luke Gedeke, where the game was just going way too fast for him as a rookie. And they benched him, and then the next time we saw him, he was a right tackle against the Falcons at the end of his rookie year. He actually looked better there. Then the next year, boom, he takes off and is a bona fide star at right tackle. But it seems like that pause that allowed Bryce Young to kind of exhale a little bit and maybe see the game from a different perspective, get Dave Canales a win or two early in the season, and then Bryce Young looked like a playmaker towards the end of the year.
Yeah, it took, for whatever reason. I mean, there's definitely a window there where it looked like they were done with him after not even a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I forget what happened. Andy Dalton had a car accident or something like that.
Yeah.
An unexpected window that gave him a second shot.
Right.
And it worked. It clicked. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that thinks of him not being their guy and maybe a guy that can take a big step forward this year. I think they've done some smart things offensively. I got a 4 for Mingo from Dallas, which is crazy.
Yeah.
They've added some small pieces. I think they did a really good job. Didn't spend a ton of free agents. They looked for a second like they were going to get Milton Williams from Philadelphia.
Yeah.
A huge splash. I don't know if I needed them to spend $26 million a year on him.
Right.
But then I liked that when they went to free agency, almost everybody they got, especially on defense, were guys coming off rookie contracts, 26-year-olds, generally from good teams too.
Right.
Kind of rating the depth of
Wharton.
Yeah, I mean, Turk Wharton, Bobby Brown. I'm not saying the Raiders and Morig are a great program you want to borrow from, but again, I really liked Morig when I saw him last year as an unconventional safety, a guy that can spend a lot of time and create a lot of havoc at the line of scrimmage.
Also, too, when you look at Derek Brown, right, he was their centerpiece up front. They missed him, right?
Right.
He's coming back. That's got to be a big boost to them up front.
Absolutely. I mean, defensively, they had very little margin for error, and they lost their best player in week 1.
Right.
So
True.
Again, Derek Brown not being there, it's very much like if you took Vea away from this defense.
Right.
That now those ends get no free and clear. I mean, there's no double teaming inside with what they had with Shy Tuttle and then whatever else they had at the tackle. So to get him back, again, we don't think of it as an addition, but it's absolutely a Pro Bowl level player they have at the heart of their defense.
Yeah.
When you look at this team, like earlier on the show, you had mentioned like you're not sure how much more they can like upgrade and that they're not like a playoff team yet. Is it strictly just from like a talent standpoint? Because even at the end of last year, they were competitive in late games. I mean, they took the Bucs to overtime. They beat Atlanta the last week of the season.
Close to beating the Chiefs.
Very close to beating the Chiefs as well. So, like, what do you see from that aspect?
I think they're getting there. I don't know, like from just a talent standpoint, I don't like their run game is still bits and pieces. I mean, Jonathan Brooks now looks like a bad miss. They took an injured running back who now is
injured again.
Rico Dowdle could be a nice value pick for as cheap as they got him.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt to have him and Hubbard as a 1-2. Again, they could go receiver again. I think Leggett had flashes of being a solid, maybe not a dominant number 1 receiver, but a guy worth the pick they put into him.
Old man Thielen's back, right? Didn't they re-sign him?
Back again. Thielen. That's one of those where that definitely is a signing that worked out better than I thought it would originally. I don't know that I thought there was a whole lot of meat left on the bone when they got him. And he's done well. And as a leader, as a veteran, as somebody you want to have in your room just to cultivate and build up these young receivers, I totally get that now. Line of scrimmage, they should be better. I mean, again, they put so much money in those guards last year. They dealt with injuries again on the O-line. So they'll be healthier there. So, and in terms of like how good they can be and how it's hard for me to think of them as a wild card, but I think if they got to 7-10, if they got to 8-9,
right,
that's a big step. If it's more than that, trust me, everyone's gonna be talking about Dave Canales and loving on Dave Canales nationally. because there's still not a lot of expectations. I think as much as they had games where they played well, I don't think of that defense as still being there. I don't think of it. They put a crazy amount of money into J.C. Horn to keep him. There's things that I like about them, but I don't think of them as a team that's come together yet. If Dave Canales were to get them to 9 wins to playoff contention this year, I'm impressed. And I like Dave Canales.
Exactly. Me too.
I would be impressed even by my own high standards for him.
Yeah. All right. So we're talking about in order, right? Buccaneers, Falcons, Panthers, right? And I think we all agree that the Saints are kind of the cellar dwellers in the division. It took them forever to hire a head coach. Nobody wanted this job, Grant.
Right. And the people that were kind of politely declining weren't even really A-listers. I mean, McCarthy kind of stepped away and said, "I'm good." Other assistants, I forget who else it was. Maybe it was in Washington. There kind of declined. So Kellen Moore again. Kellen Moore. You're getting a coordinator from a Super Bowl champ. That offense certainly looked good. Yeah, Kellen Moore's had his hand in a lot of really good offenses.
Yeah.
I don't immediately think like, wow, they got Kellen Moore. That's going to be the difference.
What can he do to help Derek Carr? And I don't even say live up to the potential. He is what he is. Derek Carr is a guy that will help you in fantasy football, but will not get your team to the playoffs, right?
Yeah, Derek. I mean, and like to watch Derek Carr, he says the right things, wants to be a leader, wants to be I mean, he and Mayfield came in at the same time, if you will.
Yeah.
With the same chance to make a franchise their own. And for whatever reason, I mean, Carr's numbers aren't terrible.
Right.
But it also
and that's what I mean. Like statistically speaking, if you looked at his football card, you'd say, okay, he's good, but he just doesn't win. Doesn't have that it factor that will take a team to the next level.
Right. And if you look, I mean, again, like historically, it's hard to find guys that have been a starter and a prolific passer for 11 seasons or whatever it is,
right,
without any playoff glimpse at all. I think it's one game and a loss. I mean, Cousins is actually probably pretty close to the next guy you point to. Mm-hmm. And that's who those two are, unfortunately. And it's like they go to a new team and you want to say, oh, they have a chance to shake this career legacy of being a 4,000-yard passer and a guy who, again, like you said, I'm happy I got him off waivers in fantasy. He's really done a great job for me. Mm-hmm. But not a guy that's going to take you to a conference championship game or have a deep run like that. And again, for Carr, the idea that he's their quarterback, is largely a function of this cap hell they're in, where you have these contracts where the only way you can really move forward is to double down on everything you have.
Right.
Whether they're great, whether you'd be like Derek Carr, I'd give him $40 million for next year. Sure, that makes sense. But they're in a position where if they don't, the dead money hit is so terrible. I mean, that's a bad contract right now.
It is
a bad contract. The
Saints are just an awful franchise. They're just bad. They're bad at everything. They're bad in terms of cap management, coaching, the players on their team. Cam Jordan's a loser. He's not going to have a Super Bowl ring. He's going to retire sooner rather than later. And here's the thing too. It's like this team had the chance to keep Trey Hendrickson, but I think that they got suckered into the legend syndrome. Sometimes your greats can't retire, right? In black and gold, right? Look at the Buccaneers. John Lynch did not retire in red and pewter. Neither did Warren Sapp. Some guys do. Mike Allstott, Derek Brooks, Rondé Barber. We certainly hope that's the case with Mike Evans and Levante David, but not everybody gets the fairy tale ending to their career. And this team had a chance to keep Trey Hendrickson and possibly let Cam Jordan go. And they sided with the legend, and sometimes franchises have to make the painful decisions. And it's like, this guy is a shell of his former self, where Trey Hendrickson is going to get, a huge contract in Cincinnati. And he's only had 4 double-digit seasons as a sacker, 4 times going to the Pro Bowl every year in Cincinnati. And by the way, the last 2 years, 17 and a half sacks, at age 30 now. So they've let some of their better players go to keep the Tyrann Matthews, the Marshawn Lattimores, the Cam Jordans, these old aging guys that are just now a shell of their former self. That's why they had to send Marshawn packing at midseason.
Yeah, and I wish it was like some real loyalty and like the franchise got to keep their best on. They're doing this for cap reasons.
Right.
They can't afford the huge dead money hit that comes with actually moving on from these guys.
Yeah.
So you have Cam Jordan, who's been paid well, okay, and has probably taken a little bit less, but has 2 sacks and 4 sacks in his last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
You know, and again, Matthew, it's great that they're bringing him back. He's not the Tyrann Mathieu that was in the Super Bowl a couple years back. I think there's kind of this self-perpetuation where when you've borrowed money from a contract, the only way you can really get out of it, not even get out of it, is to just completely push it down to the next year.
Yeah.
They've done that again. It's like they're going to be no closer to cap health in 26 than there were in 25.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And again, I think there are times where it's totally normal and good and smart
to
borrow from future cap. And the Bucs obviously did that a ton, but the Bucs did it when they had Tom Brady and they wanted
contending.
Right. Let's take advantage of this window we have and do it now. The Saints have done that to perpetuate 7 and 10 teams.
Right.
And I think that's the hard part, is when you think this Derek Carr contract, and as bad as it is, like there's like $70 million in dead money after this year
that
they'll have to account for after he's done not being a good quarterback.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think it's really hard. We always talk about ripping the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
And this with the Saints is like, what if we spent the next year taking this Band-Aid off? How would that be?
Just like slow
one hair, like,
burn,
there's another hair.
Right. And you see
opposite.
Sean Payton, of all people, like, I know it's not the exact same situation, but with the Russell Wilson contract a couple of years ago, like, they still had to eat a lot of money, but hey, they got over
ripped
it.
The Band-Aid off.
Knicks, and they ripped the Band-Aid off.
Yep.
Last thing for me about the Saints, just given the situation they're in, what's their target for the draft? Is it just best player available, considering they need to answer a lot of different things?
Yeah, it's hard. Like we do at Fox, we'll do like a beat writer mock draft, and even though we don't really have the divisional models anywhere, we still kind of drift back to our old divisions, if you will. So I'll have it where again, Falcons at 8, Saints at 9, and Panthers at 8, Saints at 9, and then Falcons at 15. So I know.
Hey, listen, just keep it real and give the Saints a really shitty draft pick, because
you'll see these drafts right now where, again, like the Saints. Again, if Ted McMillan is there, okay, you'll see them go receiver. Okay, to add another, they just took Brandon Cooks and brought him back. So I don't know that it's quite as obvious a match as it was before that. But again, like McMillan, if you're not sold on Olave and they've had injuries they've dealt with at receiver for sure. You'll see tight end where they brought Juwan Johnson back. Okay, so there's not really as big a need for that now.
Right.
I still think they could go offensive line. I think there's still holes on that line, and Fuaga, I think, will be an answer for them and be an upgrade for them.
Yeah.
But it's not like you look at them on offenses, think of them as a finished product.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and speaking of offense, the last question for me with regards to the Saints is, and this might pique your curiosity because you're a curious dude and you know all the answers to everything. But isn't it weird? Alvin Kamara's never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. Yeah. He's been a Pro Bowler, but he does it as that dual threat kind of thing. He came so close. He had a chance against the Buccaneers, to get 1,000 yards. He finished with 950 yards rushing, and I think that's the highest number of rushing yards he's ever had. He typically gets around 800 yards, but now with Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator, is the happiest guy in New Orleans Alvin Kamara?
Probably, yeah. I mean, and it's not like there's great depth there,
right?
Kendre's not really a huge answer. They got rid of Jamal Williams. That was a terrible contract.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
They've moved on from that. I guess Clyde Edwards-Helaire is there. No, I think it helps Kamara, but yeah, he's had just as Mike Evans is so amazing at getting exactly what he needs to get 1,000. Kamara has the opposite streak where it's like, if you're a Saints fan, like, oh, I'm worried he's going to get to 1,000. He's at 950. It's like, no, he's done. He's not. Yeah, it's the same streak. It's just under the glass, and it's every bit as remarkable that he's sustained it for whatever it is, 9 years, 8 years in the NFL.
Yeah.
Great back again. I think Kamara. You think about the money he's made.
Yeah.
Another guy that I think the Saints have done well to keep around, but largely because he had a huge contract.
Yeah.
They couldn't do a lot with. There's lots of other teams that had a great running back in 2019 that have politely moved on because he's 30 now and he's getting, 3.8 a carry or whatever. So Saints fans love Alvin Kamara. Certainly had a run there. I can remember where you go all the way back to, Devin White being a Bucs counter move to McCaffrey and Kamara being the two
Yeah.
best pass catching back in the NFL.
Mhm.
And obviously he's moved on, McCaffrey's moved on, and Kamara's still there. So like the Saints, I look at the Saints and I'm impressed in terms of just continuing to max out that credit card and bringing Justin Reed and sign guys.
It's not just the credit cards, Craig.
No,
like
yeah,
they're getting an OnlyFans account and they're doing a second mortgage. They're doing everything down there.
So for them, you see that limited window of what's left. And again, there's a world in which that translates to urgency and them winning close games and surprising people. But there's also a world where these old guys get injured and they don't have the depth to replace them because they haven't necessarily drafted well.
Right.
And they're kind of, I mean, the cool thing about the Saints is that even though they missed the playoffs, they didn't necessarily have any of those like 4-13 just terrible years. Like they've lived in the middle.
They're a tease.
Yeah,
it's almost like Jeff Fisher's coaching this team, like from afar.
They're not quite
remotely.
8-9. They do well to be 8-9.
Yeah.
So no, I think it's one of those where because they've pushed the chips to the middle of the table, there's the risk it's there. And maybe they get the right guy at 9 and it's the missing piece and they're in the thick of things. But I also know they finished behind the Panthers.
Yeah.
You know, they dealt with probably some more injury luck than they'd like to have last year. They'll be healthier. I like the Bucs will be healthier.
Right.
Even if that translates to a win or two, I'm still not sure it's the way. First year coach.
Yeah.
New coordinators. I'll be surprised. Like I said, they've added more than I thought they could add. They've kept more than I thought they could keep.
Yeah.
In terms of bringing Chase Young back and bringing Juwan Johnson back. And there's not a lot you look at and say, oh, wow. I mean, except for, Trey Hendrickson's probably the best example of a guy they chose not to, and that wasn't even necessarily a cap crunch. That was like Marcus Davenport makes more sense to keep.
Yeah, because he was the first round pick, but he wasn't the better player.
Right. And again, it's the sunken cost thing where
Yeah.
they put 2 first rounders to getting Marcus Davenport, so you don't want to part with him lightly. It's not like he's done much that they miss him now that he's gone. He's still a guy who's injured a lot, who hasn't necessarily, he could turn around and have a great year, but he's doing it on the cheap with much different expectations than he ever had in New Orleans.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at their first round draft picks, right? Like we'll all agree that Marshawn Lattimore was a good first round pick in 2017, but the guys before that, Sheldon Rankins in 2016, Andres Pete in 2015. Then you skip ahead to 2018. Marcus Davenport never lived up to expectations. Eric McCoy's been a good center. He was their second round pick, their top pick in that particular year in 2019, 2020. Cesar Ruiz has been an okay guard. Peyton Turner has been an absolute bust.
Like Peyton Turner, anybody that wants to complain about Joe Tryon-Shoyinka,
yes,
as a miss,
right?
He's Micah Parsons next to Peyton.
Yes, exactly. Right.
5 sacks total. 5 sacks.
Yeah.
If you could name the team that he signed with for next to nothing, I'll be impressed. He went to the Cowboys, and it was one of those where you didn't even notice.
Wow.
So yeah, they've drafted poorly.
Yeah. They had a pair of first round picks the next year. Chris Olave, who's been okay, but he's getting concussions left and right. And then they drafted Trevor Penning, who was an awful left tackle. Maybe has a future, in the other position. But Brian Burris has not been an impact guy. The defensive tackle they got in 2023, and we'll see about Fuaga. I think he's shows some signs of life there at offensive tackle for them.
Yeah, Olave, we just did this deal where we're looking at draft picks year by year for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Who's the best draft pick at each spot? And I got to where I'm like, should I consider Olave looking at number 11 picks? Because Lattimore is another guy. They got 11, good pick there. Like Olave has 10 touchdowns in his NFL career.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jalen McMillan had 8 last year.
Yeah. Right. Like Olave, I think we think of Olave as this dangerous, oh man, you can tell why they got him in the first round. He has 10 touchdowns in 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Like you can't be a wide receiver 1, even with bad quarterback play, and be getting 3 touchdowns a year. And like you said, injuries are a part of it. You certainly hope he's healthy, concussion wise, and everything else. But just in terms of underperforming, 10 touchdowns in 3 years from a guy you used 2 first round picks to get.
Yeah. Well, Greg, you never underperform as a guest on the Pewter Report podcast.
Absolutely.
We greatly appreciate your expertise when it comes to the Buccaneers and the NFC South in general, as well as the draft. We'll have you back on. Hopefully you'll be part of our draft show on day 3 over there at the team complex, and we'll get your insights on who the Buccaneers have drafted and your takes on that as well.
Guys, always happy to come on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What's your X handle, Greg? Let everybody know where they can find you.
My X handle, my X. It's just my name, Greg Auman. You can find me there. I may or may not mute you very quickly, but no, happy. I've had a bad 24 hours, so I'm a little skittish. So I guess you should follow me at your own risk. But no, happy to have you there. Love to get your questions. Yeah, thanks, guys. Good to see you.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Greatly appreciate it. Just like we appreciate our friends over at Briar Greaves. That's right, Briar Greaves. As Matt said earlier, protecting your assets starts with a company that you can count on. That's Briar Greaves. And it's more than just automotive, homeowners, flood, boat, business insurance. It's working with an independent agent that you can trust. Mark Cook, my late great friend and the late great Pewter reporter, turned me on to Briar Greaves years ago. I've been with them ever since. One of the best decisions I've ever made. Why? Because I know my insurance agent, and I know I'm going to get the best rates because I call up John Greaves, Briar's son, and he does all the legwork for me. Finds all the different insurance companies and finds me the best rate that has the best coverage, whether it's for my home or my auto. I know I'm covered with Briar Greaves. Please do me a favor. If you have not called Briar Greaves, they're going to give you a free analysis on your insurance. All you need to do is spend a couple minutes on the phone with someone at Briar Greaves, and they'll give you an absolute free quote from multiple different carriers and find out which is the best one for you. So maybe you are paying too much for your homeowner's insurance or your auto insurance, or maybe you need flood insurance, or maybe you've got a boat or an RV. They can insure those as well. So do what I did. Go to BriarGreavesInsurance.com. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S, insurance.com, or give them a call at 813-876-4166. Fantastic people. And also, too, you're going to get that one-on-one attention that you deserve rather than calling some 1-800 number, waiting on hold for 20, 30 minutes, and then not having a clue who you're talking to. Make sure that you give Briar Greaves a call, and more importantly, your business, because they do a great job here locally in the Tampa Bay area. It can serve you across the state of Florida as well. We've got some fantastic shows lined up, Matt. We're just getting started this week. We got a couple of great topics on deck for tomorrow. You and I are going to be back to discuss how the Bucs stack up in the NFC. You and Adam will be talking about, will the Bucs trade up or down in the draft, looking at some different scenarios and possibilities there. When I say we, I mean myself, Matt Matera, Adam Slavon, and Bailey Adams are all going to be in West Palm Beach next week. No, we're not going to be on the beach. We're not going to be at the pool. We're doing work. It's a business trip. We're going to be at Todd Bowles' press conference. He's going to be talking to the media bright and early on Tuesday morning at the NFC Coaches Breakfast. We'll have a podcast later that afternoon at 4 o'clock talking about what Todd Bowles said. We get him for a whole hour. Plus, we get free breakfast, too. We're looking forward to that. And that'll be next Tuesday. We'll be traveling to West Palm Beach on Monday, so no show on Monday. Then we'll have a show on Wednesday and Thursday. Then Thursday night, join myself and Josh Capo as we unveil mock draft number 4 at 5 p.m. on pewterreport.com. Then we'll be back to talk about it at 8:30 that night. So make sure you join us for that show. Bucs Attack the Secondary mock draft show number 4. And we're hopeful to have a special guest next week. Working on getting that confirmed. I got a verbal today, and we'll button it up next week. But it's a player. I think y'all are going to be very excited about it. So we'll have some more players throughout the month of April, as they return to town and get this offseason going, Matt.
That's right. So before next episode, if you're not already doing so, please make sure you're following us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment on this video, too. So this was a fun one. Thanks again to Greg Auman for joining today's show. So for Greg Auman, for Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks, everybody, for watching. We will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.